Welcome to my Bitcoin story. And today we have Asian Hodl. Asian Hodl is Bitcoiner in Asia, and he has an interest on creating an impact about Bitcoin in developing country. So welcome to the show, Asian.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me.
Oh, welcome. So I know Asia because we become the moderator at this clubhouse called the Bitcoin Asia as well. And I think it was you who started it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So maybe can you for to start, like, can you uh tell the audience, uh, what was your Bitcoin story and how did you first buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, it was in the early days of Bitcoin, I think around 2015, 2014. I was involved, I was working in the software development space, and I have a background in economics.
Mm-hmm.
So when something like Bitcoin came about, I was naturally very interested because it was like technology and economics all wrapped under one field. But in the early days, I think we were so distracted by the volatility that we didn't know how to make sense of it. And so we just ended up buying, because we were in the software space, we ended up buying it just out of curiosity to see, what it is, and just try to learn how to make sense of it. And I think it took like easily, I would say, 3 to 5 years of just learning and reading in the space to understand what it is. I think the material that we have today is supremely different from the type of material we had back then. So I think actually anyone coming into Bitcoin now is much better positioned than when people were going in back then. So naturally, we lost a lot of money.
Also, you also trade altcoin at that time, I assume, or you trade
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
for sure. I mean, in the early days, it was like a Cambrian explosion, right? We were trying to make sense of what it was. But I think to step back a bit, when you had a technology that was also having economic repercussions, you know, we were we were in a working age where we were looking at our savings accounts, and we were seeing that the interest rates were declining. So naturally, we had to think of many different ways of, what do we do with finding yield, right? And so Bitcoin was a very experimental, I guess, space at that time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very interesting because you come from software developer, and a lot of people. I think you are the first software developer person that I invited to the show. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, what was your perspective as a software developer when it comes about Bitcoin? Do you see it more on the economic value, or you see it on the technology standpoint?
So I went to school in economics, and I ended up working in software development. So I think I always fought with the other software developers, because for them, anything anything sexy was always more interesting. So they always found altcoins more interesting than Bitcoin. But because I was more interested in the economic repercussions of Bitcoin, I was always just biased to, I wouldn't say I was biased to Bitcoin, but I was always biased to like how can this technology benefit someone economically? So I was always looking through it through an economic lens as opposed to a technology lens.
Mm-hmm. So, and you think, yeah, I mean, because this is what I always hear, right? Like what you said, in a lot of like software developer, they always criticize Bitcoin as very old technology, very clunky, and
Yeah.
but there are actually a lot of exciting development inside of Bitcoin. And do you think Bitcoin needs to um, expand on the technological side, or it should be as a store of value at the moment before advancing in the technology?
It's a very interesting question and area to discuss, because I think I still, even last week I had an argument with a friend about the differences between Bitcoin and alternative coins. And I think the desire to see something innovative come out of Bitcoin from software developers is probably a emotional need more so than a rational need. Because if you look at it carefully, like I think the thing that is often not discussed with Bitcoin is, Bitcoin is not Turing complete, right? So a lot of these altcoins are Turing complete, meaning that you can do so much more on the altcoins than you can do on Bitcoin. But at the same time, when you are Turing complete, you introduce so many different attack vectors, which naturally makes it less secure. So if you want to secure the hardest asset in the world, you need to do it on a protocol that is extremely secure and cannot be messed with, right? So I think I think there's software developers and then there's software developers, right? So like if you were a software developer who really understood computer science, you would side with, and if you're a software developer that really understood computer science and you understood that Bitcoin is hard money, you wouldn't want to do anything to make it less secure, right? And I think because the architecture is like that, it'll just take more time for cool stuff to be built on it, right? And I think you can see that. I think you can see that coming with Lightning and different things, but I just think it'll take more time for that to happen. And simply because the architecture of the all coins are, Turing complete, so the speed at which you can develop all of these different things and you can, make it look sexy and cooler, and, and make it more attractive at a speed that is quicker than Bitcoin, will of course make human beings, look at the altcoins and say like, oh yeah, look at that. So I think it comes down to people, there's this concept in Bitcoin, which I'm sure you're familiar, which is like the high time preference, right? Like, so I think it's a slow and steady race for Bitcoin. And then in the meantime, you'll see one altcoin popping up and dying and popping up and dying. Like, and even at the moment, the current narrative is like, who's going to kill Ethereum? So I think the altcoins always has competitors, but Bitcoin has no competitors. I think the naysayers will come back and say like, oh, these altcoins may even flip Bitcoin. Maybe perhaps in the short term, but I don't think people would, give up. So then there's a classification, right? So Bitcoin is everything else is some sort of protocol or application layer that may or may not do. So then the question is more like, I think Michael Saylor explains it well. Like if you were going to put your savings, your cash savings somewhere, you are now the basket in which you're thinking about is like what? Gold, bonds, treasury notes, Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're looking at making a speculative investment, like a bet or a gamble, then you would look at what Apple stocks, Microsoft, and maybe some of these altcoins, right? So I think it's what sort of mindset you're in and how you think of, investment versus savings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I really like that. There's also, I think I saw it on Twitter. Once upon a time, there's a picture of a Bitcoin price chart in comparison to multiple altcoins, and you can see that Bitcoin is act as a signal, and
Mm.
then the rest of the altcoin is just like a noise because it's just going up down, and there's no like
Yeah.
really precise pattern where
Yeah.
Bitcoin is actually just steadily going up. Yeah, which is very interesting.
So I think like it's this thing, I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between saving and investment. Like, buying Apple stocks is not savings.
Mm-hmm.
Saving, I think there's this great article by Parker Lewis. I forget the full title, but it I think it does a really good job at saying like, hey, you already go out to work every day, which means you're taking risk in earning money, and you want to be able to park your money in a place that has little to no risk. But now if you're taking your earnings and you're trying to now put it in different stocks, you're taking money that you earn from taking risks to putting it in places which is maybe has even more risks. So where is that platform where you can put your money in a place which has almost no risks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So now we are going to talk a little bit more exciting because this is involved about your project, and I think this is quite interesting project. It's called the Row Bitcoin, or Rest of
Mm-hmm.
the World Bitcoin project.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, Asian, can you explain a little bit about what is it all about to the audience?
So rowbitcoin is a project that got started just out of frustration from looking at whenever there's media articles about Bitcoin, it's always arguing about the lack of a use case or, you know, discounting Bitcoin or ignoring it or just saying it's completely useless or using different ways to attack it, to almost point out like there's no use to it. So from that frustration, I want to be able to do a simple survey and ask people, specifically people who live in developing countries, like, what do you use it for, and is it important to you or not? And the idea is really just a simple survey, and I don't want to overwhelm people by asking too much. And I'm hoping we can, if we can get, so that we want to talk to at least 50 people who use Bitcoin in 20 countries, only developing or emerging markets. And we want to get their feedback. And right now, I think one second, we have got 304 responses from 37 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a really large response from places like Iran and Lebanon. And we want to increase the numbers because we really want to try to get to 20 countries, but get fifth. So we've got a few responses from many countries. So in terms of countries, we've exceeded the target, but we really need to get to 50 people per country.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, why well, why do you start this project, like especially in the developing country? Like, what is your goal basically at the end when you gather all of this data?
Okay, so I think so. I grew up I've experienced like currency devaluation
Mm,
in the Asian financial crisis, and I know what it's like for people to, overnight lose the value of the savings that they have, and I think Bitcoin has a pretty good track record of help, acting like a lifeboat for people. But I have to caveat by saying this is not financial advice, but um, I think it's a useful tool to encourage savings in developing countries. It's an asset that literally no one can steal from you. So that means the government cannot print more Bitcoin, and it's hard to, if you store your private keys safely, no one can get custody of it that easily. So I think I'm hoping like after this survey, we can think about different ways of how we can encourage the ownership of Bitcoin in developing countries.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Like coming from also the I'm from Indonesia, so we also got affected by this Asian crisis. And I
Yeah.
remember at that time it was really crazy time. I was
Yeah.
really little, but I know that the Indonesia that I knew before was completely changed
Mm-hmm.
just after the Asian crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess I guess right now it's a very interesting time because um the crisis for other crisis is actually uh it's just we are just waiting for another crisis to happen, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
current
Yeah.
situation of the pandemic and money printing. So what do you think yeah, what do you think uh I mean, right now you haven't got all of the data yet, but do you
No.
think that a lot of Asian people are actually thinking the same way that Bitcoin can actually be a good store of value? What is your thesis?
Uh, thesis is that it plays a role, important role in their life, and I think we are seeing some interesting data. So, I mean, I'd like to release it more in more comprehensive manner, but what we're seeing is, so in the question where we asked like, is Bitcoin important? Like the majority of them say it's very important, and there's an interesting number of people using it, uh, for example, for money transfers and for receiving the salary too with it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a high it I mean I will publish the chart later, but it is showing, at least for the people who are answering the survey, that majority are saying it is a store of value for them.
Mm-hmm.
And but there are some downsides. Like I'm seeing a lot of people still leaving it on exchanges. So I think uh, we need to do a better job at educating people about custody,
Mm-hmm.
like either using a mobile phone or hardware wallets. And I also think maybe hardware wallets need to become cheaper so that more people can utilize it. But yeah, so I'm hoping that I can publish the data so you'll be able to see it at like a global level, not at a global level. That means like looking at it from all countries' perspective, but also looking at it from like individual country perspective. Like you'll be able to see the differences, say, between Indonesia and Lebanon, for example. Like, that maybe more people in Indonesia use it for this.
So you will publish this data,
Yeah. So you can
for
go to
transparent.
this. Yeah, you can right now. You can go to rowbitcoin.com, rowbitcoin.com, and we're gradually trying to publish the data.
And so what do you think is the biggest motivation for Bitcoin adoption in majority of the world? Well, you said that people use that for uh, accepting or sending money abroad, right? But uh, based on the data that you have so far, what do you think is the biggest push?
Yeah, so I mean, it's supposed to be a surprise, but I think might as well reveal it here. Based on the data we're seeing now with the survey, it's like savings or store of value is the biggest reason for adoption of Bitcoin.
Store of value, yeah. So even though, like, we always see that, I mean, even on the marketplace, we see that sometimes the Asian time, which is normally when it's nighttime in the US, the Asian are awake, the selling order is actually much higher than than
Yeah.
in the US. So it seems like in Asia, a lot of people are selling. So do you think it's still like become a store of value for
I mean,
majority of people?
trading is like number two as the reason for usage, right? So the first one is store of value. The second one is trading. I don't think we can ever stop trading and arbitrage and allow the free market. I mean, the data is showing that people are using it or claiming to use it as store of value as savings. I think if they're maybe seeing it as a way to profit in the short term, maybe that's a good thing. It's the free market doing its job, right? Maybe they could be trying to sell and then buy more Bitcoin, because I mean, ultimately it's about accumulating more Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least like in Indonesia, I see it, a lot of people always frame it as, do you play Bitcoin? Like
Yeah.
they still have this mindset of seeing Bitcoin as a game for
Yeah.
some reason.
I mean, like we can I don't know how much time you have, but for example, we can look at the Indonesian results at the moment. Like so far we have 24 responses in the Indonesian data set. 87% say it's tabungan, menyimpan uang, which is savings or store of value.
Yeah.
56% say it's for trading and speculation. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
But then if we look at, let's say, one second. Or let's say we look at the Arabic version. That we have 39 responses so far. 71% say it's saving and store of value. But only 21% say it's for trading and speculation.
Wow.
Yeah, so there are like these minor differences based on culture, geography that I think is interesting that will come out of the data.
Yeah. I mean, it also depends on the current countries, political situation, economy and political
Yeah.
situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, well, that's Saudi Arabia, but probably like right now we know in Turkey, like the lira.
No,
eh,
sorry. The Arabic form has many different countries, so
Oh,
it's not
okay.
specific to Saudi Arabia. So, but
Okay.
I can open the form specific to Iran.
Okay.
Say, yeah, like 82% see it as savings, and 69% see it as speculation and trading.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
but what's interesting is, let's see. So for Iran, there is like a 10%. There's a bigger number when it comes to, so it's like almost 30% use it for sending money, sending and receiving money overseas. It's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So
mean,
that's a big number. Yeah.
yeah, I think because of the sanction, right? Like, I think it's
Yeah.
very hard for Iran to receive
Mm,
and sending money. Otherwise, they need to use
yeah.
US dollar.
Yeah.
Um, so, from this data, or even like from your experience, w- how can a developing country benefit from Bitcoin?
How can it? I think that's a good question. So I think you can look at it as, I guess, at the macro level and the micro level. I think at the micro level, if individuals start to say, I mean, it's a huge challenge, right? I think you have to totally like you have to unlearn everything you know about money and then learn it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the money you have in your bank account is not money.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out like, okay, how do I, put aside a little bit and, save over the next 5 or 10 years, so that this is like a lifeboat for me. It's almost like thinking of it as a savings account or retirement fund. So I think at the micro level, it can help people save, help give them a lifeboat, and help make them more economically empowered, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at a macro level, that means like governments getting into Bitcoin. I haven't fully explored that topic. I have seen different people talk about it, putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets and all that, but I'm not sure. Um, I guess it would be just like another asset that the government would have, and they would be able to, have access to more resources to be able to develop the country better. But I think those are maybe. I think the macro stuff is a bit too far ahead, because at the end of the day, it comes down to how governments make decisions and what are the right decisions for public welfare, and and those things are often political. So I think the beauty about Bitcoin is you don't need to wait for the government to help you or take action. You can just, start saving yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, recently we also seen what happened, just because of the political instability, like what happened in Myanmar, and
Mm.
people cannot. I think you shared that video on Twitter. Like, I saw
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
lining up, people lining up just to get a little bit of money in the ATM, but the
Yeah.
line is just so
Yeah.
long,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's one area Bitcoin could help. Like if you have heavy financial restrictions in country suddenly, if you had a little bit of Bitcoin, it could ease your life. But the one thing that's important is that in a lot of these developing countries is internet blocks that are happening. So we have decentralized money now, but we still don't have decentralized internet.
Mm.
So So, you have to be careful. Like, you can't put all your eggs in one basket and put everything in Bitcoin, because, tomorrow the internet could be shut down,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't really transact.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess the other option is to have gold. Yeah, probably like
Maybe,
for.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see, like, do you think uh I mean, right now everyone is talking about the possibility of, hyperinflations happening in the US, right? Because of
Hmm.
the um money supplies there is really high.
Yeah,
um and as we know that most of world's currency is tied to US dollar.
yeah.
And from your point of view, how do you think it will affect the rest of the world if, let's say, or when the hyperinflation happen in the US? Like, what do you think the scenario will be?
I think there was a very interesting podcast uh, that Stefan Rivera did with two guests, I think from Argentina, and I kind of agree with what they said, but I could be wrong here. I think because, so there is the Bitcoin world and then fiat world. In the fiat world, the US dollar is still the currency, reserve currency, right? I think you wouldn't see the US dollar going up in flames. What you would see is like all of these small countries going up in flames, and the people in those countries turning to the US dollar as the first instinct. So you would probably, in the short to medium term, see a strengthening of the US dollar. And I think whether the US dollar does well or doesn't do well, I think Bitcoin will always do well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people are worried about the US dollar well because of Bitcoin and all that. I actually think it strengthens the case for the US dollar, because people will want a digital alternative to convert into, and like a fiat alternative. And I think, they'll naturally go to the US dollar. So, my opinion is that I don't see, yes, there are fears that people are putting in. And also the other thing that, these people who lived in places where there's hyperinflation, like, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes like many, many years before suddenly you realize that you are in a state of hyperinflation. So, I think ultimately, at least in the short to medium term, I think US dollar will be strong. I think
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin will do well, and it doesn't cut the dollar at all. In fact, it strengthens the dollar.
Mm-hmm. And
But I think
then.
the losers will be the countries with smaller currencies, because the
Mm,
people, with access to digital currencies, people will be like, why should I hold, this currency X anymore?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I see. And uh and do you think like hyper Bitcoinization will happen after that? Like, especially in the developing countries, like if, let's say, US dollar is collapse.
Oh, that's a very tough question there.
I mean, just your opinion. This is podcast.
Yeah,
This is not not a
yeah,
financial
I know.
advice.
I guess hyper Bitcoinization is already happening, right? I think if Lightning delivers what it can do really well, and I think that's already hyper Bitcoinization, because you could just transact with anyone over Lightning and never need a fiat alternative.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge for Bitcoin is spending Bitcoin, because you want to save your Bitcoin. So that's another like incentive change to hyper Bitcoinization. Or does hyper Bitcoinization means that it's taking over all the assets in the world? I think you're on the way. I think I think it'll just take time, right? I think once you cross gold, then yeah, I think you got to wait until you cross gold.
Until the Bitcoin market cap crossed the gold. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be very interesting time. And I don't know, like will we I hope it will be a smooth transition. It's not going to be like
Yeah,
crazy
that's true.
transition.
I think between now and I think the next 10 years will be full of ups and downs, because I don't think they will let it happen so easily. And but I also think that I think um, people maybe overestimate that governments are fearful of Bitcoin. I think governments are maybe more fearful of stable coins than Bitcoin.
Mm. Why do you
Yeah,
think is that?
because I think at the moment they just see it as this like weird, highly volatile asset. I think there's no consensus in the government that, yeah, okay, some politicians in certain countries may come and say like, oh, it's like gold. And I think the worst it can be is like, they're looking at it and then they say it's like, it's just like gold. you know um, I think that's fine. Like, I don't think Bitcoin should threaten any of these governments. It should be actually promoted as the best thing would be government saying like, hey, you should save in Bitcoin, but use our government currency to spend it. That's no problem. Like, that would be great, because I think from a developing country perspective, I'm going to anger a lot of the plebs and all that. From a developing country perspective, at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you have a stable savings somewhere, right? You don't want to have to deal with losing your savings, losing the value of your savings. I have a friend whose uncle in Turkey, I was talking to him, and with the lira losing its value, all the money that you save was just 70% of it was lost, the value
Yeah.
of it. So I think for people in developing countries, the perspective is different.
And the perspective is to save money
Or
for long term, kind of like that.
yeah, to have some safe haven where you don't lose the value of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because because most of developing country have a very fragile currency
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fragile currency, fragile political system
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, why do you think in a lot of the developing countries, like, people secretly try to hang on to dollars and stuff? Like, I think Bitcoin is that new dollar, right? People try to find a way to hold some dollars, and I think now people are trying to find a way to hold some Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, I remember during Asian crisis, the dollar went from 2000, like $1 is equal to 2000 rupiah, and then went up to 15 or almost 18,000.
Yeah,
So people, yeah, people were who smart people who know that this thing's gonna happen. They already store a lot of a dollar at that time, so
yeah,
then they were okay. Before the crisis, they bought a lot of real estate. They bought a lot of asset actually.
yeah.
So Bitcoin is another asset or store, yeah, store of value that might save you someday.
Yeah, and I think, again, this is a developing country perspective, right? The, hyper Bitcoinization, lightning, all that stuff is like great, but I think the most important thing is like, how can we make sure that we are not going to lose our wealth, right?
Yeah, because wealth is everything, right? Like the
Yeah.
money that you save. I mean, like you work, you exchange your
Yeah,
time
you
and
work for 20
energy.
years, and then yeah, you work for 20 years, and then all of a sudden your currency hyperinflates, and now 50% of all your savings is useless.
Mm. So yeah, that's and then also the like let's say if you want to put it in bank, probably the bank give really small interest, and then yeah. Very interesting. So yeah, I guess we are about to close our show. So how people can support you, Asian? How can people, if anyone in here listening to Row Bitcoin, how can they participate?
All right. If you know anyone living in an emerging market, please share the survey with them. So the Twitter handle is @rowbitcoin, and the website is rowbitcoin.com.
Mm-hmm. And they can also help translate some of the survey, right? Like to be in the language.
Yeah. Yes, if you see a language that you'd like to add, tell us. I think someone reached out to us and offered to translate the Vietnamese one, so I'm hoping to launch the Vietnamese one this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you have like a specific deadline for this raw Bitcoin, or you will be publishing it as it goes? As you reach 50 respondent, you will publish the result one by one, or what is your plan for this?
The idea as I get 50 responses per country, I'll start publishing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So so everyone, if you're listening this show and then you're from developing countries, or friends that are in emerging market in developing countries, contact contact Raw Bitcoin, and all this data will be very beneficial for not only just people in Asia, but like the whole Bitcoin community in general, because this will be a huge thing, because as we know that most of the Bitcoin content or data only comes from US, mostly like US or Europe, but mainly United States. So this is very interesting if we get like this data. Okay. So anything else, like if people want to contact you, they can go to Raw Bitcoin and or your Twitter handle, maybe Asian. What is your Twitter handle?
Just Asian Hodl 1. Twitter is @hodl1. Row Bitcoin is @rowbitcoin, and website is rowbitcoin.com.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Asian, for sharing your stories and also your, this amazing project. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to the My Bitcoin Story. Stay tuned for more episodes and click that follow button.